What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast, powered by Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Hope you had a great weekend. We got the rankings coming out. Football season's getting closer. Miami comes in number 19 on the coaches poll. We'll talk about that. Also going in depth, continuing our position previews. Linebacker. I feel like I say this every single position, but a storied position at the University of Miami, the linebacker position. We will dig deep as far as the depth chart, young players that you may not have heard as much about who could be rising and playing a factor this season. A lot to talk about that position. It is night and day from what it was when Mario Cristobal first got here. First, I want to talk about some folks who always rank number one in my list, Anijar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anijar and Levine. They don't get paid until you get paid. Pete.
Good to have you back, D, and excited to be back tomorrow with my practice reports from the car outside of Green Tree. There was no practice today, but we'll be out there again tomorrow, bringing you the the instant reaction, of course, with a lot of the feedback, or not the feedback, a lot of the observation have been physical, seeing these guys move around, up close. It's been great to see a lot of the body types, see how many of them have kind of changed their bodies since spring, even, and the guys that we've gotten a first look at as well. But it's been a fun first week of practice, and of course, we'll have all that news for you as fall camp continues over the next couple weeks here.
Yeah, Pete, thank you for holding it down with those daily practice reports. We'll keep that coming this week. So we'll be double teaming those practices, giving you the absolute latest that we can report from Canes camp. Pete, a lot of energy. I saw some people in the comments thought that you went on like a bender or something. You're trying out a new energy drink and you had a little twinkle in your eye talking about these players. I know it's an exciting time.
Listen, that's like, I get juiced up getting out there, man. It's like, again, we keep saying like the old days, but it's the new era of CanesInSight, and we're excited about this season coming up. We're here in studio every day, and it's we got everything going now. We got pedal to the metal here for the season, and we're excited about it, man. Shout out to Bullpen Mafia too. I have my hat on here, Javi Salas's podcast, and talking baseball, but check them out. And I know you always plug them on the baseball episodes, but got to shout them out here as I'm wearing the merch right here.
No, absolutely. They do a great job. And who else has been doing a great job? That's Mario Cristobal restocking this position at linebacker. Probably the biggest change physically of any position on the defense. On offense, offensive line. From when you got here to what it is now, you're talking about two different sports. I think you can say the same at the linebacker position. Manny, a linebacker guy, knows how to coach linebackers, but as far as recruiting them, identifying them, bringing them in, the body types were not where you needed to be at Miami. The speed was not where you needed to be at Miami. The aggression was not where you needed to be at the University of Miami at that position. And I think, Pete, just going there and getting an eyeball on these players, you could see the difference.
Yeah, and it looks like the modern day linebacker. We continue to say guys who can run, can hit, can cover, right? Because I think that's been an issue recently at Miami, that there just hasn't been guys who can run and cover. Because at the end of the day, if you're playing linebacker, you should be able to tackle, right? But in today's game, the way the game is spread out, right, with the backs, coming out of the backfield and being threats in the receiving game, with the tight ends, and we look at it with Miami's roster. You look at a guy like Elijah Lofton, right? This is not only a Miami thing. There's guys like this all over the country who are mismatch problems, right? And I think you're finally getting to a point. A lot of these guys are young, right? And we'll talk about them individually, but you go out to practice and you see these guys in pads, and it's scary what this group could be. This year, I think it's going to be a really, really good group. But in a year or two, man, I mean, I think you're talking about a group that could be one of the best in the country, the way that we talk about offensive line right now.
Yeah, and let's talk about the right now guys that are going to help us this year before we get into the depth, which, by the way, some of those young guys may help us this year too. There's a team that had a lot of rotation at linebacker. We should probably start there. What's going out the door, right? You lose a Corey Flagg, overachieving player, got the most out of what he could do at Miami. Grateful for his service, for his playing time here in Miami. You saw what he did against Clemson, sealing that game with a highly instinctual play. He's going to be a great coach, and he contributed to the University of Miami as a player. That play kind of put it on the pedestal as far as the finest moment of his career. You also had KJ Cloyd, which to me, when we got him from Louisville, guy didn't play that much at Louisville. I didn't understand the pickup. But Derek Nicholson, who we should be talking about here as part of this evolution of the linebacker position at Miami, he knew that this guy could play, had a very, very good season, basically splitting time with Wesley Bissainthe, very productive, going to get a shot in the NFL. That was a better get than I realized at the time to bring in a KJ Cloyd, and a good sign about what Derek Nicholson knows at that linebacker position.
Yeah, and he was a guy with traits, right? Could run, could hit, and had a really solid year for Miami. Again, was a 1 year holdover sort of thing, but I think he did a really good job there. And I think you're bringing another guy from Louisville this year, and Jalen Alderman, which we'll get to in just a second here. You have to be excited about, again, the fact that he's a guy that Coach Nicholson worked with, was a very productive player at Louisville. But at this position, man, I don't think it would be right not to start with Kiko Mauanoa, who, the captain of the defense, came in and was one of Miami's most productive players last season. Has a chance to be, he had a chance to get drafted last draft, D. I mean, as a late round guy, but comes back and really going to put himself, I think, in a position to be, a top 3 to 4 round draft pick here this season.
Yeah, look, I'm a huge Shaq Quarterman fan. Shaq Quarterman just signed with the Eagles, so his pro career continues, mostly on special teams, but he's getting paid, he's playing football, and was an outstanding player for his entire career in Miami, basically productive from day one and putting up huge numbers and a big part of some very good defenses. Was talking to a friend of mine, a coach who, was very familiar with Shaq and had a lot of respect for him. And I said in the last spring, I said, look, I think that Kiko Mauanoa could be our best linebacker since Perryman. I think he might be better than Shaq. And I said that with all the respect in the world for Shaq, because I am the biggest Shaq Quarterman fan there is, Pete, as you know. You see me in the group chats going to war. But with Mauanoa, I think what makes him unique is this is a guy that played a lot of quarterback in high school, played a lot of offense in high school, really learning the linebacker position. Shaq came in stud, less stud. He was basically there when he first got here. He got better, but he was, he came in at a high place and left at a high place. With Mauanoa, I think he's still learning how to be a dominant linebacker just because he didn't have that experience at the position. He's been asked to do different things, and he's just getting better and better with his size, with his athleticism and the instincts. Look at the stats. 82 tackles, that's good, very good. But 18 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, and an INT, 2 forced fumbles. This is just a true playmaker with length, with athletic ability. Coverage, I think, is going to be what he's really focused on as far as the NFL and being the best linebacker he can be at Miami, but somebody who can make an impact in multiple ways.
Yeah, and look, I don't know if when he runs the 40, I don't know if he's a 4.5 guy or anything like that, but it seems like he plays faster than whatever he's going to end up running. And I think that's only going to continue to get better as, look, learning the position, but also playing in his role here at Miami as the leader of the defense. Had 7.5 sacks last year. So he's very good at timing up those delayed blitzes. And that's something that at the next level goes a long way as well, because you need these guys who are essentially spying on the quarterback, but they shoot the gap once they see their opportunity. And I think that's something that he showed very, very well last season.
Yeah, that timing, like you mentioned, or like let's say a running back is going to, you expect him to go out in a passing route. He does not. So then you go ahead and go get the quarterback. He's great at that, of course, on the design blitzes as well, with his length, with his timing, and his ability to finish. One thing that I think is an underrated trait in defensive players in general, particularly in pass rush situations, is can they finish the play? PFF, and you'll say this guy has a ton of hurries, which is important. But some guys have a lot of hurries and not a lot of sacks because they're stiff and they just don't have the instincts to really break down and the coordination to break down and finish the play. Mauanoa, when he gets close to that quarterback or he gets close to that running back in the backfield, that guy's going down. As you can see, 18 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks. I think with the disruption you're going to get in the front 4 this year, he's going to be even more opportunistic, even more dangerous because you don't need him to create pressure with what you're getting from Ruben Bain, Elijah Alston, Tyler Barron, Akeem Messidor. But he can bring it, and he's going to cause a lot of problems. Really excited to see his game go hopefully to the next level. He's wearing the number 1. which Cam Ward's one of the number one. Cristobal does not give that number out liberally, but he's given it out to Francisco, Kiko, Mawanoa. First team all ACC preseason. Expectations couldn't be higher for this young man.
And then the next guy we're going to be talking about here, someone who's been here for a couple seasons now, Wesley Besanth. And look, I tweeted about him the other day when I was out at practice that he looks like he's put on some good weight. I don't think he's ever going to be a 235, 240 pound, thumper at that position. But speed has never been an issue with him. But I do think that he's put on some good weight. It's taken him a couple of years to do that. But he's finally starting to look like more of a linebacker. And I'll post the picture here that I took. It wasn't a great angle on him, but trust me, I've seen him up close, and he's definitely added some good mass.
Yeah, I think from what I recall talking to him, he's getting in the 220 range, which he was somebody that always played to me above his size. Like he's always been a fast run and hit linebacker, but he's never been one that struggled getting guys down on the ground. He has that wiry, explosive strength to strike. He had it in high school. He had it since he's been in Miami. He can get off blocks. He's not light. He might not have weighed as much as he weighs now, but he's never been a player that to me played light. He's someone that had force to him. And I think that's only going to increase now with the extra weight. You want to talk about breakout players. I've talked to people around the program. I saw spring. And when people ask me who's going to be that breakout player on the defense, right at the front of mind is Wesley Besanth. Look at his stats last year. Good year. 44 tackles, 6.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. Not bad. KJ Cloyd basically split time with him and did basically the same thing statistically. So he's going to want to eat into some of that production. But everybody talks about the game slowing down for him, the leadership, just the extra step of knowing what's coming and then using all of his speed to get to that spot, playing faster because of the increased knowledge. The fact that, someone mentioned that he went on a mission, which there was a story about that we posted on CanesInsight.com. For free, 6.9 million posts and counting. Sign up for the forums. Get ready for camp. But he went to Dominican Republic, volunteered, and really sacrificed a big chunk of his offseason to go help kids and build a school. So that shows you the maturity of this guy. Again, this is something that was mentioned to me as just one example of what this guy's doing maturity-wise. Spring was great. I think the fact that you bring in a Jalen Alderman, who we'll get to in a second, is going to push him even more, because from what I understand, it wasn't like they brought in Alderman because they weren't confident in Besanth. They're trying to win the ACC this year, and they're not taking any chances. But I think a guy like Alderman, who's 13-game starter, we'll talk about him in a second, on a defense that was better than Miami last year, that's going to push Wesley Besanth more even than a guy like Cloyd pushed Wesley Besanth. So I think this addition, the added weight, the maturity, the just increased knowledge, comfortability in the defense. Wesley Besanth, to me, is a guy that could have a true breakout season as a true junior at the University of Miami.
Yeah, and I think with a guy like him, 2D, it's like when you're coming from the high school level as the top player on that defense or top linebacker, you kind of have the freedom to run around and just go make plays, right? There's not as much structure within the defense. So I think that was part of the learning curve for Wesley as well. And I think the game's finally slowing down for him in the sense that, like, he doesn't have to think about it as much, right? He can play. We're talking about with Kiko, but I think with Wesley as well, just understanding his role and his job on each play and going out there and making it happen, because I think sometimes it's way more of a thinker's position than people realize. And obviously had a lot of expectations coming in. Once you have a couple years under your belt, look, I don't want to call it a make or break year for him, but it essentially is. But I think we're very excited about the progress he's made. And again, a guy who I think has taken a big jump, had a really good spring, and there continues to be some good reviews about him now early in camp.
But of course, when you talk about Miami Hurricanes and just where it's supposed to be, there should be depth. And when I say depth, not just, guys that are on the depth chart, guys where there's an injury, he could play and help you immediately. And that to me is what you get with Jalen Alderman. 13 starts, 58 tackles, 7 tackles for loss from Louisville. This is a defense that was better than Miami last year. They ranked, just pulling up the scoring defense, 37th in the nation, 22.9 points per game. Miami allowed 24.1 points per game. This is only against FBS opponents, ranking 48th. So Louisville, elite red zone defense as well. Alderman's a guy from Valdosta, Georgia, just a pure linebacker, kind of like Corey Flagg, but more talented, more length, less physical limitations, but high IQ, just finds a way to make plays. Just maybe a rich man's version of that kind of player, because you're not giving up. It doesn't look awkward when he's on the field. You watch him against Florida State, this guy making plays in the ACC championship game. Definitely looks like he belongs on that stage, playing with a lot of energy. He's a tempo setter when you watch him. He just, he's not undisciplined getting into fights and getting 15-yard penalties, but he's chippy, brings a lot of energy, brings a lot of instincts, and can play the pass as well. Had a game-winning pick six against UCF earlier in his career. Always played linebacker, not a conversion guy. Played linebacker for Valdosta, a huge program, and did well. So to me, talk about a safe guy to take some of these snaps from Corey Flagg and KJ Cloyd that you know what you're going to get. I think Jalen Alderman is an insurance policy. I don't want to say that because he's guaranteed going to play a lot, but he's there to make sure that this linebacking core is high-level ACC championship quality, because he's been in that stage already.
And again, I mentioned it before, but the familiarity with Coach Derek Nicholson, we see this also with Coach Guidry and Chevis Jackson, some of their familiarity with guys they brought in with Elijah Alston and Deani Hill in the secondary. But that goes a long way, man. In today's era, they can go out and get whoever they want, essentially, right? You have the entire country to recruit from. So for them to go back to the well, and for Coach Dienick to go back to the well there, it says a lot about where he thinks his ceiling is. And you're talking about a guy who has a couple years here at Miami potentially. This isn't I think with a lot of these portal guys, we're thinking, oh, they're one and done. Let's see what they got this year. But with Alderman, you're talking about a guy that Kiko Maunoa has 1 year left now, and then he's headed to the next level. Alderman is a guy who could be here for multiple years, will most likely be here for multiple years, right? So I think it's an interesting thing to track there, where you say, man, we can get this guy for a couple years, and he can really bring a lot to this program.
No question about it. I'm excited to see what he does. He can play both spots as well. So he's not just Wesley Bassaint's competition. He's Kiko Maunoa's competition. He's pushing both guys, and one gets hurt, he fills in. But even if they don't get hurt, this guy's going to play a ton. He's basically a third starter. So you got two spots, but really you have three starters and potentially more as we get into these young guys. But before we do, it's August. If you're like me, you got kids running around, you're getting them back to school. Maybe you're going back to school, right? Maybe you just are on the run and you need to put stuff in the bag. Look at that Adidas Canes book bag for back to school. Just again, high quality at the Miami Hurricane team store. That's MiamiHTS.com. This is official Miami Hurricanes gear. This is supporting Miami's athletic department when you purchase this exclusive, beautiful gear from the Miami Hurricane team store. You can do it at MiamiHTS.com. You can do it at the store, at the Thesis, right across the street from UM, right on US 1, right there in the mix of all Canes land. Easy to get to, right there on US 1 at the Thesis. But again, if you're out of town, MiamiHTS.com. And it's not just the book bag. It's the new orange slides. It's all kinds of great gear, signed memorabilia. Remember, Miami Hurricane team store, very close relationship, of course, with Canes Connection and the players. You see players hanging out there all the time. Great events. So if you want to be right there in the heart of Miami Hurricanes football, go to the official team store, MiamiHTS.com, or the store at the Thesis. All right, so now moving on to some young folks, right, who are pushing these veterans. And that's what you want at the University of Miami. And you want elite young guys. You don't just want guys that are young. You want guys that picked Miami over Georgia, Ohio State, Alabama, guys with elite physical tools. And I think some of these names we're going to be talking about here are both highly ranked guys, but also more than that, just physically gifted, mean, aggressive players that look the part and play the part, starting with, our Cuban brother here, Raul Aguirre. I can't roll man. Oh yeah, and by the way, I can't even roll my R's. What a disgrace I am. I know. I got to practice. My grandmother's rolling in her grave. 6'2", 233. Played a lot in spring with Kiko Maunoa out and did a nice job. I think there's a lot of faith, because I asked when Jalen Alderman was brought in, I'm like, is there a lack of faith in Kiko? in Popo with this move? And they said, no, not at all. We're trying to win the ACC. We need all the bullets that we can get. There's a lot of expectations for Popo. Another guy that's kind of an energy giver, someone who plays with a lot of emotion, similar to Alderman. Basaint and Mauigoa are more your silent killers. Alderman likes to talk. Aguirre likes to talk. Somebody with size, like I mentioned, former running back. He has that athletic ability as well, can play sideline to sideline, can play the pass, and just a very solid, highly recruited player. And when you're recruiting top 5 classes consistently, as well as bringing in elite transfers and developing guys, players like this are your depth. This is Miami Hurricane depth. This is college football playoff depth. When this guy's not penciled in as a starter, that's good news for the Canes.
Yeah, and a guy that we've had on the podcast as well through Canes Connection did a great interview with him. Go check that out if you have not seen that from the spring. And D, with not only him, but really this next wave of guys we're about to talk about, the aspect of special teams to me is really exciting, right? Because these guys can all run, they can all hit, and special teams has been pretty solid, I think, the last few years at Miami. But you're talking about a group that can really, I think, swing a game or two this season with big plays in that department. So again, he'll see snaps this year, from scrimmage, obviously, but I think he's one of those guys that could be a demon on special teams.
Yeah, and look at this list of the next guys we're going to talk about. I think a lot of guys fall into that category you just mentioned, Pete. So Aguirre is someone who picked Miami over Alabama, over Georgia, Ohio State, top of the line recruit. This next guy I thought was somewhat underrated by those SEC schools, but we will know him as a potential star player for the Canes in the years to come. That is Cam Bobby Pruitt. So, I don't say this lightly, right? I know I like to get excited and I like to hype up guys, but I'm saying this as serious as I can. And I talked to multiple people around the program who concur with this sentiment and, in fact, have expressed this sentiment to me. Cam Pruitt, if he continues to do what he's doing and continues to stay on the path that he's on, this could be a 3-and-done player. A true star linebacker with elite closing speed, with the versatility to cover, and with the ability to strike and knock offensive players backwards, to play with instincts against the run, to play with instincts against the pass, and to be everything you expect in a modern linebacker. He's a freshman. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves, but I suspect when you guys get your eyes on number 22, he is going to be an immediate fan favorite.
And D, you said you don't want to hype him up, but Mario's hyping him up too, right? So this isn't just your typical green tree hype, right? This is someone that Mario has singled out. He said he's one of the most impressive young linebackers he's ever been around, right? So I feel like we say it once a week on this show, but like when Mario says something in the media, he means it, and there's real reason behind what he's saying, right? So we talk about it with Elijah Lofton, how he compared him to having a Ruben Bain type of impact, a Mauigoa impact. Bobby Pruitt is someone that he's speaking about in similar vein. And look, I had a chance. I mentioned him the other day in my instant reaction after one of the practices. Obviously, needs to put some weight on. Lower half, you'd like to see him put some good weight on, but that's going to happen naturally. I don't think there's any doubt this is a guy who's going to see snaps from Miami and is, you talk about some of these guys offensively that can kind of be like movable chess pieces, right? Defensively, he's someone that you can disguise a lot with him, right? Because he should be able to play in coverage on some of these tight ends, right? But at the same time, he should be able to help against the run, right? So excited about him. Guy who's going to play, I think, a lot this season, but a year from now, 2 years from now, I think you're talking about one of the best linebackers in the entire country.
Yeah, and linebacker is the key word. We talked about him potentially playing that nickel role where he's sort of your big safety, small linebacker, your Sam/nickel, and he does play that role when that role is used, which is not all the time. But this is a guy who's playing linebacker for this team. He's playing weak. He's playing middle. He is somebody who is going to play this year if he stays healthy and continues to do what he's doing. And it's not just going to be in that limited nickel role. He is somebody that can play linebacker and do all the things that are needed to do at that position. So extremely excited about him. Extremely excited about this next player, Pete, who you've been talking about since you saw him in high school at Palmetto. That is Bobby Washington, 6'3", 220, and one of the best athletes that you're going to see on the defensive side of the ball.
He can run, man. I mean, there's some talk about him being one of the fastest players on the team, which I don't doubt. However, I think with him, right, it's about the game continuing to slow down for him. But you said it in high school. I went to a lot of those Palmetto games. I saw him and his brother Robbie playing a lot. And he was just, I mean, he would fly off the edge. They would use him a lot as a blitzer. And he was, I mean, the speed was evident. Special teams, he was a beast on as well. If that light can really go off for him, you're talking about a scary potential here for him. For sure going to be a guy on special teams, though. I mean, that's without a doubt.
Yeah, look, I don't know about GPS. I don't know about track times. But what I could tell you is going to these spring practices, and look, there's some fast players on the defense. Robert Stafford can run. Jaden Harris, the safety, can really run. To me, just from a football speed perspective, standing on the sidelines and seeing these guys, the fastest players in pads on this defense, I'm talking about everybody. Bobby Pruitt, Bobby Washington, number 22 and number 17, to me, are the fastest guys that I saw this spring on this defense playing in pads, faster than any corner or safety on the team. These guys can flat out fly.
Yeah, I think the amount of ground that they can cover, you talk about it with safeties, a lot of time is like guys with range, right? But at linebacker, you've got to be able to play sideline to sideline in today's game. Both of those guys can do it. And the thing about Bobby Washington that's a little bit different than Pruitt right now is like he's probably got 25, 30 pounds on him, right? You saw one of the clips I was just playing there. Like, you're not talking about Bobby Washington as the guy who needs to add size right now. Really, it all comes down to the mental side of the game for him. Again, understanding his role, the game continuing to slow down for him. Physically, there's nothing that needs to be said about adding weight or not sure about his movement ability out there. He's got that down pat. So I don't like to say, well, if the light goes on, but like if the light goes on, you're talking about a special talent right there.
Yeah, consistency, because it's one thing to make a play in the backfield. You don't want to misread a play and get gashed, right? That doesn't help you, no matter how fast you are, how talented you are. I think back to Arthur Brown, who was the number one linebacker in the country coming out of high school. Randy Shannon brought him to Miami. Never really clicked for him at Miami. Goes to Kansas State. It clicks for him there, ends up being a second-round pick to the Baltimore Ravens. I don't want that to happen with Bobby Washington, where he has his success elsewhere. I think he is somebody who, when you put him on the field, he might make mistakes, but he does have instincts. He's not a robot out there. I think he can find the football. He just needs reps. And of course, look, this is a very important season. It's not like a learning season for these guys. You got to win games. But I think if this guy gets some steady reps throughout the year, by the end of the year, he can be someone who helps you a lot. And of course, he has to hold up his end of the bargain and continue to buy into the process, which he's been doing, because he could be, like you said, Pete, a major difference maker with his size and speed.
Well, and I'll say this, D, I'm very confident in. There's a handful of these guys where we say need them to continue to learn the position and things like that. But I feel very confident about the coaching they're getting at that position right now from Derek Nicholson. So that goes a long way, man. We talk about recruiting all the time, every day here on this show, and needing to have the talents necessary to make the things happen on the field. But I think they're getting developed properly there at that spot, 100%. So there's a reason why Derek Nicholson was elevated to co-defensive coordinator, right? Or I don't know if I don't know what the exact role is, but definitely got a raise and a new title this offseason with good reason. Yeah,
and look, a lot to talk about still. Some more impact players. Usually, I mean, think about where the depth chart was. You'd be out of linebackers to talk about after the first two guys. Now we got even more guys to talk about here. But first, want to remind everybody we have a special announcement on Wednesday, August 7th, 8/7. We have a game-changing announcement for CanesInSight. There you see Teal Green rocking that 8-7. Tune into the podcast, 8-7. Like and subscribe always so you can get that notification. But Wednesday, special announcement is going to be major game changer for Canes Insight. Really, really juiced up to get you guys that news, and it's going to be fun. Wednesday, 8-7. All right, so going back to another player who I think fits this bill, who's one of the few Manny holdovers, right? You talked about the Restrepos, Jalen Rivers, Jacoby George, Ryan Rodriguez. Another Manny holdover, and there's not many, Chase Smith, listed at 6'2", 210 on the website. I think that is probably well out of date. I mean, this is a big, big kid. Still wearing the knee brace from his injuries, which is you hate to see because this guy was such a fast, athletic player. I think he still has some of that speed and athleticism, but it's going to be a process. I'm excited to see him and just hearing buzz about him on special teams. I think that is definitely going to be a role for him off the top, core key special teamer. Question is, can he showcase that athleticism and versatility we saw early in his career to leapfrog a Bobby Pruitt or a Bobby Washington and get a role on this team?
Yeah, and I think he's at this point has to be one of the veterans. He is a veteran on this team. You talked about the fact that he's a holdover. We pay very close attention to those guys, D, right? Because again, in today's era, it takes a lot for them, number one, not to just want to, walk out of the door and enter the portal, but the staff has to want them back as well, right? So it's a two-way street there. And I mentioned it the other day, man. He looks huge. Came out of high school at like 190, playing a lot of receiver, right? And we were talking about his high school clips before this. The explosiveness was there. He dealt with the knee injury. I know he dealt with a shoulder injury as well that held him back a little bit a couple years ago. But I think for sure he has what it takes from a mental standpoint, right? I'm not concerned about that, but it's making sure his body can catch up to everything else there. And hopefully, right, it's a little bit kind of like what we were dealing with Elijah Arroyo at tight end last season, where Chase Smith was getting more acclimated as the season went on. Obviously was not fully 100%, but as we get into the thick of the season here, week 5, week 6, right, as unfortunately injuries happen and guys go down, could he be someone that emerges from that room? And I think for sure he has what it takes from a physical standpoint. We just hope he's as healthy as can be, right?
No doubt. And look, go watch the film from the 2022 season before he got hurt. He was the best special teams player on the team at that time, 2 years ago. Last year, you mentioned coming back. Arroyo, I think, is a good comparison. He did have a sack, I want to say, against Bethune-Cookman. It was one of these blowout games. Mm-hmm. He did have a sack, so he played a little bit. To me, he's the kind of guy you don't hear about. Then he has a good game on special teams. Maybe he gets a rotation and does well, and now, boom, he's locked in. So his opportunity will come. Will he be ready for it? I hope so. I think he can be, and he has the ability to be a major boost to this group if he can just show that he's healthy. And I don't think this is like a Trevante Citizen situation, even with the big knee brace. I do think there's life still in those legs. I think it's more of a confidence situation, getting out there, making the plays, and then just letting it rip.
Definitely. Now we have one more guy to talk about here, that another one that has stood out to me, just like eyeballing the group. I mean, he's probably the tallest one in this group. And I know you mentioned him during spring as someone that, like, as things started to slow down for him, you could see why he was as highly recruited and highly rated as he was. And that is Darius Hayes, who, of course, Miami flipped from Florida. So pulling up this clip here, you can see his size here from the Under Armour All-American game, just him coming out of the tunnel there. This is what they're supposed to look like, D.
Yes, the length. He talked about knockback, which is something Cristobal, he was very vocal that when he got to Miami, he didn't feel there were enough players on the defense that knocked ball carriers back or knocked offensive linemen back. I mean, it sounds simple, but that was a focus of Cristobal's plan to revamp this roster. Is we need to be knocking people back. We're doing too much drag down here. We need more strikers. And I think Darius Hayes is somebody who he will knock back an offensive lineman. He will certainly knock back a running back, tight end, whatever it is. He has that ability. Sometimes at that 6'4" height, guys don't break down and get low enough to actually deliver that kind of blow. Sometimes those guys are wrapped down tacklers just because of the leverage. James Williams probably fits into that category. Darius Hayes can get low and strike. Very instinctive against the run in particular. I heard it as the summer went on, his athleticism started to come out a little bit more, and you started to see more of that fluidity and maybe that 3-down ability that you didn't see as much when he first got here. But this is someone I think at the minimum who could stop the run, who can be very, very good on special teams. He could grow into another position because he's so big, but he plays like a linebacker. I think he ends up being really a linebacker that makes his name against the run and being able to take on blockers in a way that some linebackers just can't do because of their physical limitations.
Yeah, and another guy that we spoke to at Media Day, we should be dropping that interview someday this week. So stay tuned for that. But he told me himself, he said things really slowed down for him, really late spring. But you get a whole summer in between that. And I know you were saying he was a guy who was impressing during workouts, but just imagine, what he could look like next season, man. Because again, these guys can be contributors this year. But the fact that you bring in a Jalen Alderman, for example, you're not relying on some of these young guys. You hope they elevate and with their athletic ability can come out there and surprise some people. But developmentally, a year from now, that room is going to be absolutely loaded with these freaks that we continue to talk about.
And look, the health of your team a lot of times, as far as your depth in recruiting, can be seen on these coverage units. I think back to Butch Davis. I remember seeing the Weaver twins flying around, knocking people out. Ken Dangerfield knocking people back. Carl Walker was sort of a linebacker safety hybrid. Just those body types. Even guys that didn't break the lineup, because some of them did. Of course, your Rocky McIntoshes and guys like that, Jonathan Vilmas. But just those guys, just the overall depth of guys that can run and hit with length. You saw with Butch Davis when things were starting to trend in the right direction. I think you are seeing it with this roster and the names that we've gone through. Really excited about that. And look, you can see the buildup of this roster when you go to the national rankings. Miami coming in at number 19 on the coaches poll. Before we dive into that, while Pete's pulling up the tweet, Canes Connection. We have the link in the description. Click the link, which is Canes Connection /CIS. You could write that into the bar, or you could just use the link that we have in the description. That will take you to a page. Sign up to that page with the Canes Connection link, the CanesInsight link, or canesconnection.com/CIS. Same thing. You will get your first month, no matter what price point, $1 with Canes Connection. And you will also have access to private Zooms where I'm giving you the latest on practice, on recruits, insider info that I cannot give out in a public setting. You will get that as a Canes Connection member who uses the CIS link, canesconnection.com/CIS, or the link in the description of this YouTube video. It's on the website as well. It's right there on front and center when you go to our website. This is the official NIL collective of the Canes. This is it. This is how we were able to land these names that we just went through, this total overhaul of the linebacker position from when Mario got here to now. Canes Connection is an integral part of that. You could be a part of that too. Everybody that's contributed, you are a part of that. Those of you who still have not done so, be a part of that overhaul, the continued overhaul. Miami's still recruiting big-time linebackers, as you can see when you pull up the recruiting rankings. And Miami is continuing to add transfers like a Mawanoa, like a Jalen Alderman, that increase the quality of this group. The reason why Miami is ranked number 19 in the rankings, despite not having the best season, is because they recognize the growth of this roster. The reason Miami is going to be a top 10 team this season, when it's all said and done, in my opinion, is because of the strength of this roster and the great work done by Canes Connection. So use the link in our description here, canesconnection.com/CIS. Support CIS, support Miami's official collective, and get plugged into the most direct recruiting info available. So with that said, Pete, here we go.
Here's the ranking. I mean, look, I think 19 is pretty fair, D. I think we both probably agree this is a top 15 team realistically right now to start the season. But again, I think it's fair, right? You mentioned it. Coming off the season Miami had, it's a completely different roster. And you can debate some of the teams ranked ahead of them, of course. But top 20 going into the year is a nice benchmark. And you beat Florida week 1. Beat them convincingly. You're probably a top 10 team, but this is you win week 1, you're in the top 15 right off the bat there, and could be higher depending on what, how that game turns out,
Yeah, I agree totally. I think it's fair for now. You want to prove them even more right by flying up these rankings. I think Miami is the kind of program that you win a game against Florida, you look good, then you take care of business with the other games early in the schedule. This is going to have a lot of helium. You're going to rise quick because I think people recognize that this is a top 10 roster. There's doubts about the staff, Georgia Tech, the 12-13 record the last couple of years. These are things that are going to give anybody pause. So it's kind of a show me situation there, but they know the players. Some of these players were on other teams too. So they know what these guys can do. They're not projecting too much with a Cam Ward, with a Damian Martinez. I mean, these guys have played. Xavier Restrepo, who's on the team, his production doesn't need to get projected. Offensive line. These are things that you kind of know what Miami's going to do. Tyler Barron, Akeem Messidor, proven production. Francisco Malinois, we just talked about. So I think it's a fair ranking, but you can go in either direction, right? Clemson at 14, FSU at 10. I think Miami's got better rosters than both of those teams, but those teams have the respect of consistent performance. FSU is probably more recent than that, but you do have 2 straight good years. So I get that respect factor. I think this needs to be assigned to Mario Cristobal. Hey, we respect your roster. We have questions about you. And I know he's ready to sort of eliminate that doubt and create a top 10 program here in Miami, just like he did at Oregon.
I mean, this is a kind of an not really off topic, but a note to look at, man. I think the ACC is going to be, better than people think. You see NC State here at number 22. There's some good preseason buzz about Virginia Tech. Kyron Drones is getting some good buzz NFL-wise at quarterback. Louisville, North Carolina obviously have been, a thorn in Miami's side for years. So this conference, in all the talk about conference realignment, and listen, there's going to be movement, I'm sure. Florida State and Clemson, we see all the rumors about them. But I like where the conference is at right now for this season. I think it's a solid group of teams. Is there that, obviously we hope Miami can be that, but there's not a top 5 preseason team right now consensus. So is there that team there right now? No, but this is turning out to be, I think, going to be a really fun season in the conference.
Yeah, no, I agree with you totally in the ACC. I'm looking at these guys here at the bottom, Arizona, Southern Cal, Kansas, Iowa. I mean, a good Louisville team, I think, would be just as good as those teams. A good Virginia Tech team. If those teams really kind of solidify, I could see them in that mix. NC State, I really like this year. Mm-hmm. If I'm a betting man, Grayson McCall, the leadership he brings, I think he's the best quarterback they've had in a bit, and they've had some pretty good quarterbacks, but just from a leadership stability standpoint, I think he brings a lot to that program.
Jordan Waters, the running back,
took the words out of my mouth. Yeah, from Duke. I love his game. He's got a lot of speed. I think he's probably one of the most underrated pickups in the country.
Agreed.
Of course, Concepcion, what he can do as far as running with the ball, catching the ball. They added a top 50 player in the country at receiver. Probably the highest rated receiver recruit or recruit in general that they've had in years. So they have a nice tight end. There's a lot to like about NC State. Their defense is always solid. Of course, Miami was able to take one of their top players in CJ Clark. That was a feather in the cap for the Canes, but they got guys. Brandon Cleveland, who was a Miami commit at one time, is a pretty good tackle for NC State. So if you're asking me, just looking at this list, teams that I think could rise, I do think that one of those teams that could rise is NC State because of the talent, the skill position, the coaching, the consistency, and the stability with Grayson McCall. By the way, the name I was looking for is Terrell Anderson out of North Carolina. He was actually a top 100 player, but a highly rated recruit, number 95 ranking. One of the better recruits that North Carolina's ever had. Army All-American. A lot of people thought he was going to go to Georgia. Ends up going to NC State. He teams with Concepcion. This is a good team and a team that gave Miami problems last year.
Yeah, agreed 100%. I'm a big Waters guy, as we were talking about. I think, playing at Duke kind of a little bit under the radar over there, but in that offense, right, I think we'll have a lot of opportunity to put some big numbers up.
We'll see, man. We're getting close. We're talking about real football stuff every show. It's exciting.
No more vacations either. You're locked in now. You're ready to go.
No, we're locked in, man. We're going to be at Green Tree tomorrow. We're going to be we're doing it big, man. We're doing it big. It's going to be a lot coming. Big announcement on Wednesday. Got a lot going on with Canes Insight, different things, different forms of content we're bringing to you guys. Stay locked, like and subscribe. Appreciate all your support. And as always, go Canes.
Go Canes.
Yeah, this an insight to the Canes, and you know we ain't playing no games. Joaquin said dominate, so that's what we do. Home of the legends and 7th floor crew, down in Miami where hurricanes brew. You here for the rumors, we bring you the news, cause it's all about the you, and nobody do it like Canes Insight. 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 It's Canes Insight.